Have you ever wondered what would happen if a pastor died on the altar and returned with a direct message from Jesus about the rapture? What if this message revealed that September marks the beginning of 7 prophetic days before the trumpet sound? In today's video, you'll hear the true story of Ethan Blake, an American pastor who crossed the line of death and returned with an urgent warning for all humanity. Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which city you're watching from. Let's spread this message as far as possible. My name is Ethan Blake. I have 47 years old and I'm a pastor of an evangelical church in the state of Texas, southern United States. For 2 decades, I preached about repentance, salvation, and the end times. But to be honest, despite the fiery preaching and prophecies I mentioned so often from the pulpit, I never fully believed that the rapture was so imminent. It was easy to repeat verses, and quote Revelation, talk about trumpets, but deep down I thought, it's still a long way off. Jesus will take a while. My heart was divided. I loved serving, but I felt increasingly cold inside, as if everything were just a role I had to play. And the truth is that, even as a pastor, I was always tired, not praying like before, not fasting, not really waiting for him, until it arrived, a Sunday in September. The church was full. It was the first service after the holiday, Labor Day, and something was already in the air. A weight, a strange urgency. I remember walking up to the altar with my Bible in hand, ready to speak about the signs of the end. I had prepared a sermon on the Feast of Trumpets and Yom Teruah because a church member had sent me a video saying something prophetic would happen that month. I laughed when I watched it, but even so, something compelled me to speak about it. In the middle of the sermon, when I mentioned the phrase, "The Lord will come like a thief in the night," I felt an absurd pressure in my chest, as if the very air had been ripped from my lungs. I tried to continue, but my vision darkened. The church began to scream, and I saw my wife running toward me. And then, silence. I was standing in front of my own body fallen behind the pulpit. The temple lights disappeared, and everything around me dissolved like smoke. I was in a place absolutely real, more real than anything I had ever experienced. Time stood still. A gentle yet authoritative wind blew across my face, and a glorious presence approached with irresistible intensity. That's when he appeared, Jesus. Not as in the pictures, nor as in children's stories, but as the King of Glory. Your eyes penetrated my soul, and I could not sustain even a crumb of my pastoral pride. He didn't ask my name. He didn't need to. He just said, "September is no ordinary month. Time is running out. Come, I want to show you what men don't see." And then, the journey has begun. I was swept away as if by a whirlwind of light. There was no sound of engines, no wings, no angel wings flapping, just divine intention in motion, as if God's own will were pulling me along an invisible path between realities. Jesus walked before me, and though his feet touched nothing, space curved around him in reverence. Suddenly, we stopped. Before us appeared what appeared to be a mixture of a celestial map and a living calendar. It was like a 3-dimensional scroll, floating in the air, with days, months, and dates rotating around a flaming axis. And there, highlighted with a pulsating golden glow, was September. But it wasn't just a month. It was a gate. Yeshua, he revealed himself this way, with that name, pointed to the month with an authority that pierced my spirit. This is the time of the calling. Many treat it as commonplace, but it is sealed with prophetic codes that few decipher. The Feast of the Touch is not a ceremony. It is a call to spiritual warfare. Immediately, I saw scenes flash before me like windows opened in time. Synagogues in Israel, fervent services in underground churches in China, vigils in African deserts, and American crowds, sleeping spiritually. And that's when the revelation started to become unbearable. I saw the earth as a suspended globe, and from the sky descended rows of angels, carrying something like live trumpets, made of light and sound. They were silent, but vibrated as if about to burst into sound. There was tension in the heavenly air, a tension Santa, as if the entire universe held its breath. I asked Yeshua, "Is it now? The rapture will happen this September." He didn't answer with ordinary words. His gaze pierced me and conveyed a certainty that burned more than any direct answer. He pointed to the celestial calendar and said, 7 days. There will be 7 days of supernatural invasion upon the earth, a final wave. After that, the touch will come. My bones shook. I wanted to cry, scream, beg for more time. But in heaven, there is no negotiation. There, everything is already determined. And then he made me look again at the globe. I saw a wave of white fire begin to form in the Far East. It was as if the Holy Spirit were exploding in regions unknown to the world. Remote villages in Indonesia, secret caves in Iran, slums in Latin America. And this wave grew rapidly, running like lightning, passing through the nations, as if a tide of glory were clearing the field before the harvest. But I saw something even more disturbing. The United States was cold. There were only isolated points of light amidst a vast shadow of entertainment, sarcasm, unbelief, and religious vanity. Yeshua then looked at me and said firmly, "The country that should have been a voice has become an echo, but there is still time. Those who listen will run, and those who run will save others." At that moment, I understood that the Kalat was not for everyone, but rather for the awakened, the vigilantes, the thirsty. And Jesus whispered the phrase that would mark my soul forever. "Tell them that the 7 days will begin with a sound that few will hear, but those who do will never sleep again." And so the counting began. From where we stood, hovering above the globe in light and glory, time no longer behaved as it did on earth. Minutes felt like hours. Days felt like breaths. But there was such a clear sense of urgency. I knew something was about to break. It was then that I saw the first trumpet move lightly in the hands of an angel, but it still didn't sound. It was as if the sky said, "Not yet, but almost." It was then that Yeshua reached out and touched the celestial map, right over the date marked as first new moon of September. At your touch, 7 bands of light opened toward Earth. Each band descended over a specific region: North America, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Oceania, and Latin America. It was like a last outpouring of glory, 7 days before the trumpet sound. And then he spoke with a voice of thunder and melody. 7 days of revelation, 7 days of confrontation, 7 days of separation. This is the final wave. The scenes I saw next left a lasting impression on me. On the first day, sleeping churches began to tremble. Literally, some physical temples shook as if shaken by an earthquake. But it wasn't the buildings. It was the spirit of the people inside being awakened. I saw pastors weeping at the foot of empty pulpits, confessing old sins. I saw members excitedly opening Bibles as if for the first time. On the second day, young people began to have visions during common meetings. I've seen prayer meetings in attics and garages interrupted by cries of repentance, revelations in languages no one had learned. A 12-year-old boy in Tennessee fell to his knees and cried out in perfect Hebrew, "The bridegroom is coming. The bridegroom is coming. Prepare the oil." On the third day, celebrities started disappearing from social media in silence. I saw famous Christian influencers who denied the rapture simply disappear from the public eye, overcome by fear. Some stood up and asked their followers for forgiveness. I laughed. I doubted, but he is coming. On the fourth day, prophetic dreams invaded ordinary people, workers, housewives, truck drivers, soldiers, all being visited by night visions with the same theme, God's clock ticking to zero. And on the fifth day, what I saw broke my heart. I saw a crowd in Times Square in New York, people laughing, dancing, taking selfies, mocking street preachers. But over them hung a thick darkness, not physical, but spiritual. It was as if they were under a veil. Preachers shouted, "Turn around. Time is up," but no one listened. I saw an angel trying to reach a girl in a red dress but she turned her face away at the very last moment. On the sixth day, the whole world went into conflict. Not wars, but internal conflict. I saw politicians waking up with night terrors, religious leaders trembling in cathedrals, and even atheists kneeling alone in the dark, whispering, "If you're real, show me." And he was showing. The seventh day, it was different. The entire sky was filled with silence. The 7 angels raised their trumpets. The map began to spin rapidly, and the month of September glowed a brilliant red, like illuminated blood. Jesus looked at me with flaming eyes and said, "Tonight at midnight, the portal will be touched." I shuddered. There was no more time. On that 7th day, as the sun began to set over Jerusalem and the new moon barely traced an arc across the sky, I felt the universe hold its breath. It was as if all the galaxies were observing a single point. the prophetic midnight. I saw spiritual clocks scattered around the world. One over Washington, D.C., another over London, Moscow, Tokyo, Brasilia, and especially over Jerusalem. They all pulsed at the same time, with a golden glow that darkened with each beat. And then, at exactly midnight, the impossible happened. The first trumpet was blown, but it wasn't a sound like we imagine. It wasn't audible to ordinary human ears. It was a spiritual sound, a vibration that invaded prepared souls, a frequency that only the awakened could capture. It was as if the bones, blood and spirit of the faithful recognized that sound before they even heard it. And immediately, the division began. I saw houses in absolute silence, where only a person disappeared in the middle of the night, leaving behind clothes, glasses, shoes. In some churches, entire pews emptied. In others, no one disappeared. I saw a youth service in Arizona. 30 were gathered. 15 disappeared in a flash. The others were left crying, screaming, trying to understand. One of them fell to his knees and whispered, "My God." It was true. The scene that broke me the most was in a hospital. A faithful nurse, who prayed every day in the corridors, simply disappeared in front of an incredulous surgeon. He screamed, ran down the hall, but in his spirit, the trumpet had been muffled by pride. He heard the sound, but too late. Meanwhile, in the heavens, the movement was like a spiritual magnetic field, we souls being pulled like particles of light, rising in speed, but gently, as if they were floating within an invisible river, bodies being transformed in the air. There was no fear. Those who climbed smiled. They sang. Some were crying, but not from pain. They were crying because they were finally going home. But on Earth, panic set in. Security cameras began capturing disappearances. Live broadcasts crashed. Reporters interrupted regular news to report the unexplained phenomenon. But in the spirit, those who remained knew. Even the scoffers, even the atheists, knew what had happened. Jesus led me to look at a spot in the sky where a glorious crowd was gathering. They were meeting with him in the clouds, just as it says in Thessalonians. It was real, much more real than any theory or doctrine. And Yeshua whispered, "They heard, they believed, they prepared the oil." And then he showed me the other side, the ones who heard the trumpet, but were not pulled. I saw people alone, walking on empty streets, muttering why. I saw nominal believers, proud pastors, children of intercessors, all paralyzed by the pain of losing the eternal moment. They had heard the same thing as the others, but their hearts were on a different frequency. Jesus looked at me, with tears in his eyes. Yes, tears. This isn't what I wanted, Ethan, but time is up. And then, for the first time, I felt the weight of divine justice, not as anger, but as inevitable separation. The portal has been closed, and the earth would never be the same. After the trumpet was blown and the portal closed, an unearthly stillness descended upon the earth. It wasn't just physical silence. It was as if the world itself had lost its sound, its soul, its hope. But the most terrifying thing was the echo. Yes, the echo of the trumpet still vibrated in the hearts of those who remained. They listened, but now the sound, which before called to glory, it hurt like a knife in my conscience. I saw people from all corners of the world throwing themselves to the ground, screaming. I saw a young man in Alabama, in despair, throwing himself in the middle of the road with a Bible in his hands, shouting, "I knew it, I knew it. Why didn't I listen?" In San Francisco, a Christian influencer who mocked the rapture burst into tears on camera. I was joking. I just wanted likes. My God, why didn't I take it seriously? But the sky was silent. Ethan, me, was still watching everything from above, as if floating between the already and the not yet, with Jesus by my side. He didn't smile. He didn't shout either. He just looked with eyes wounded by love. They had it all, he said. Word, warning, dreams, visions, even miracles. But they rejected the oil. They exchanged fear for entertainment. And now, the period of deception begins. And that's when the vision changed its tone drastically. What was once light and glory has now become chaos and darkness. I saw entire cities given over to absolute panic accidents, fires, security system failures. But more than that, I saw a spiritual hunger begin to spread. People were rushing to churches, but the temples were locked. Pastors had disappeared. I saw Bibles being ripped off the shelves, but no one could read them like they used to. The letters were there, but the spirit had been taken away. And then it came, the false global explanation. World leaders went live on television and social media. One of them, whom I recognized as a well-known political figure, said coolly, "Calm down. We're investigating a possible global-scale cyber attack, possibly alien, but everything is under control." And meanwhile, I saw people shaking their heads, trying to believe, but deep in his eyes, they knew it was a lie. It was the beginning of the great prophesied illusion. Jesus looked at me and said with regret, "They chose to believe in the peace of men. Now they will live under their rule. But even so, there will be remnants, martyrs, last messengers. Hope has not died. It has merely changed form." And I saw teenagers who were not taken, but at that very moment gave their lives to Christ with brutal sincerity. Some in basements, some in forests, some in devastated homes. They knew nothing about theology, but they cried out and received an invisible seal on their foreheads. Jesus pointed to these and said, "They will be persecuted, but they are not lost. There is still a harvest in the midst of tribulation." And it was at that moment that I realized the rapture was not the end, but the beginning of the fiercest war the world has ever seen. But it was too late for many. The echo of the trumpet still vibrated, not as music, but as judgment. The view changed again. Now I was no longer flying over the world, but inside a huge oval room, surrounded by flags of every nation. It was a kind of global crisis headquarters. Large screens displayed maps, graphs, and statistics on mass disappearances. And, in the center of the room, men and women with powerful appearance and controlled expression discussed, without showing panic. They already knew. Jesus, by my side, made me feel something I had never felt in life, the spiritual intelligence of deception. There were not just human leaders there. There was something behind them, something invisible to the human eye, but clearly present in the spirit. Spiritual entities, dark beings, some with the appearance of light, others grotesque, inspiring words, whispering strategies, forging the lie of the century. One of the leaders, who I saw was a European spokesman, stood up and announced firmly, "The world needs stability. We need unified leadership, a coordinated response, a new system, a new era." And so, before the spiritual eyes, I saw the beginning of the government of deception. They called it Global Peace Treaty, but Jesus spoke to me in a bitter voice. They call it peace, but they do not recognize me as its prince. They are preparing the throne of the impostor. I saw the decree being drafted in haste. New laws, new digital currency, abolition of exclusivist religions, who preached only salvation. I saw men signing papers with gold pens, smiling, while in the spiritual world, chains were thrown over the nations like invisible imprisoning nets. And then, the phrase that echoed across all media, "Humanity has entered a new era. We are safe, but in the heavens." The angels cried. Jesus made me look closer. I saw families being separated, nominal believers lining up to receive the new global identification, something that seemed innocent, like a chip or QR code, but carried a spiritual seal. Who received, changed in spirit. It was as if a dark mist took over the eyes of the soul. I saw churches being demolished, Bibles being banned in the name of global unity, and I saw the true remnants, those who woke late but did not bend, fleeing to caves, forests, deserts. They gathered at night in silence, with pages torn from scripture hidden in plastic bags, and even without understanding everything, they prayed with raw faith, without liturgy, without framework. Just faith. Jesus looked at me and said, "These are my martyrs. They have lost their touch, but they will not lose their crown. I love them just as much." I cried, because I understood. The rapture did not separate the good from the bad. It separated the two distracted guards. And now, the distracted have woken up, too late to escape the tribulation, but not too late to resist until the end. And he completed. September revealed the ready. Now the time for the tested begins. And as Earth erected a global control tower, the sky was already preparing another wave, only this time, of judgment. After the ascension of the righteous, Something changed in the very spiritual fabric of the planet. It wasn't just absence. It was as if a covering had been ripped off the earth, and now she was bleeding without protection. The prayers of the saints, the fasts, the pure praises, everything that silently sustained the world had been taken with the raptured. Yeshua took me to a high place, above the clouds, and pointed to the planet below us. I saw spiritual cracks opening up in various regions. They were light cracks in the invisible, through which creatures previously trapped began to escape. They took the form of shadows, smoke, tentacles. They were torments with consciousness. And he said, "Now the world will feel the absence of intercession, because they mocked grace. They will experience the weight of justice." The atmosphere was thick. The sky's colors were darkening. The auroras, which had once seemed like dances of light in the Arctic, were now tinged with red, like signs of divine alarm. I saw the beginning of the first trials. In America, earthquakes began to appear in previously stable regions. A gigantic crack cut the US in half, and I saw entire cities without power, without internet, without prophetic voice. To Europe, rains that seemed eternal fell on capitals, washing blood, but without regret. In the Middle East, I saw what looked like fire fall from the sky, but it wasn't a meteorite. It was like judgment columns, reaching places where unholy pacts had been made. And in the spiritual world, hordes of deception marched through the cities. These beings were different. They didn't attack with claws or teeth. They blew ideologies. They sowed lies like smoke. They made crowds believe that all of this was evolution, necessary, good for everyone, and the scariest thing, people applauded. Jesus showed me a huge line, snaking down entire avenues in big cities. There were men, women, and even children waiting to receive the New World identity, a mandatory system, presented as a solution for food control, security, and social stability. But in spirit, each person who accepted that seal stopped shining. And then Yeshua said something to me that made my heart stop. They weren't forced. They asked. They desired. They called it freedom. But in truth, it was the exchange of eternity for momentary comfort. But not all was darkness. In hidden places, I saw small secret meetings in caves, ruins, even abandoned subway tunnels. There, the remnants resisted with supernatural strength. They had no instruments, no long sermons, no big screens, but they had fire in their eyes and tears on their faces. A girl, who could barely read, recited memorized verses with such purity that I saw angels bowing down to hear her. Jesus smiled, for the first time since the vision began, and said, "These are the ones who do not bend, and as in the days of Elijah, I will sustain them." And then, something changed in my perception. I saw that even after the rapture, the Spirit of God had not been completely withdrawn. He had just hidden himself, hidden among the humble, the desperate, the sincere. The trumpet had sounded, the sky had closed, but still, some hearts could touch him, and the time for extreme decision was just beginning. After the trumpet and the global spiritual collapse, a new character has appeared on the scene of the vision, and his presence was as hypnotic as it was terrifying. I saw a crowd in delirium, millions gathered in squares, avenues, and in front of screens, waiting for the appearance of the one who would be presented as the definitive answer to the world chaos. He wasn't just a politician. He wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was the man the whole world desired, but whom heaven never recognized. When he appeared, the planet fell silent in adoration. He was handsome, charismatic. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a magnetic weight. Every word that came out of his mouth seemed to caress the wounded egos of the crowds. He didn't shout, he seduced, and the worst part, he used a language of peace, spirituality, and unity, but did not mention the name of God or Christ. Jesus took me into his presence, not physically, but in spirit, and said, "This is he who comes in his own name, and the world will receive him." Surrounding that man were 10 leaders of major economic blocs. They bowed to him like disciples. One of them raised a golden cup and said before the cameras, "Before you we deliver the nations. May your government bring the new dawn." And the people applauded. They cried. They shouted. Some event, they worshipped on their knees. Then I saw the exact moment the decree was signed. A document called Global Compact for Human Unification. With him, All nations submitted to a single code, a single currency, a single faith. This faith was inclusive, tolerant, modern, but without the cross, without repentance, without blood, without Jesus. I saw former pastors and religious leaders, now adjusted to the system, preaching gentle messages to packed auditoriums, stating, "The rapture was symbolic. We are all ascending now, together, in collective consciousness, but in the spirit." I saw this man's throne being held by chains that descended from the deepest darkness, and I heard a voice behind which was not from Jesus, but from the abyss. "Finally, the throne has been given. Now I can reign, in the name of the people." And in that moment I saw that leader's eyes change. For a brief second, became black as burning coals. His soul was possessed, but the world didn't notice. Jesus looked at me gravely and said, "He did not sit on the throne through politics alone. It was the idolatry of lukewarm hearts that enthroned him. He is not the beginning of evil. He is the reflection of the coldness of men. I saw that your ascension happened in September and in the same month as the rapture. It was as if a portal of glory closed, and another of deception opened. And as he addressed the world, proclaiming the beginning of a new era, I saw in golden, deceptive letters what was being said between the spiritual lines. 'Give me your souls, I will give you safety.' It was at that moment that I realized it was no longer the world as we knew it. Now, what was seen was the stage of the apocalypse, already set, and the world clapped his hands. As the new world leader celebrated his ascension to global applause, Jesus took me to a part of the vision that I will never forget. It wasn't a physical place, but rather a kind of valley, full of voices, thousands, millions, crying, screaming, murmuring, all in despair. It was the sound of those who were left behind, and now they knew. I saw people hiding in forests, abandoned warehouses, sewers, caves. But what impressed me the most were the faces. People I knew had grown up in the church, worship leaders, pastors, missionary children, everyone with the same look, remorse. They weren't just sorry, they were devastated for realizing that they knew the truth and ignored it. Jesus pointed to a man who was trembling in a fetal position, whispering. I preached about him, and yet I remained. I knew the sound of the trumpet. I even cried out in Maranatha, but my hands were full of vanity, and my heart was full of pride. In another corner, I saw a young mother praying with her young children, trying to explain why their father had disappeared. "Children, Daddy was ready, I wasn't, but we can still follow him, even here, even in the dark." And that's when I realized a new spiritual movement emerging. Among those who remained, there were two types of people. One, those who cursed God, saying, "If he were good, he would have waited longer. Why didn't he warn us more clearly?" Two, and those who fell face down on the ground, crying, "We listened, but we ignored it. Now we will go all the way, even if it costs everything." Jesus made me understand that the latter would be the martyrs. They were not taken in the rapture, but would not sell their souls in the reign of the impostor. And he said, they will not lose eternity, but they will know pain. They will have to follow me with blood, not just with praise. Then I saw a group being captured by forces of the new government. They were taken to a spiritual re-education center, a place where, under the facade of peace, believers were forced to publicly deny Christ in order to maintain access to water, food, and housing. I saw a boy of just 10 years old being placed in front of a crowd, and an authority saying, "Say that all roads lead to God, and you will return to your family." The boy, with a firm voice and wet eyes, replied, "Only Jesus is the way. He can take everything from me, but not my name in the book of life." And in that instant, I saw angels descending upon him. They did not save him from physical death, but they took it with glory. His soul shone like living fire. And Jesus said to me, "This is one of my little martyrs. Heaven will receive him with honor." On earth, the pain grew, the hunger increased, the persecution intensified. But among the remnant, there was a new radiance, a pure, radical, unbreakable love. They did not seek blessings. They didn't ask for comfort. They just wanted to stay faithful until the end. And the most shocking, each of them, even though they were suffering, said the same phrase, "He's coming back again." Jesus made me look at the earth again, but now the skies were black as velvet, heavy, dense, There was silence, a silence that did not come from peace, but from waiting. Heaven hadn't forgotten. It was just preparing. I saw the stars as if trembling. Creation itself, as it says in Romans, moaned in labor pains. The persecuted remnants, dirty, hungry, hidden, still praised. But it wasn't a beautiful praise, with vocal harmony or instruments. It was a broken, torn, true cry, and there was power in that. Jesus then stood before me and said, "They wait for me, and I will come for them." It was at that moment that the most powerful sound I have ever heard echoed through the universe. One bang, as if 1,000 thunders merged into a single note. The sky opened up, but not like clouds parting at sunset. It was a violent tear in reality, as if eternity had invaded time, as if the invisible said, "Now everyone will see." And then he appeared, again, but now not as a lamb, as a lion. His eyes were like fire. His crown was not symbolic, it was real, living, made of glory and motion. His cloak was dyed with blood, not the blood of Calvary, but that of the martyrs. He rode on a white horse, accompanied by an army so vast that space seemed small, and among those who came with him, I saw familiar faces. I saw those who were taken away, those who were taken in the 7 days. I saw the faithful nurse, the boy from Tennessee, the intercessor no one noticed. They came with him, shining, laughing, crying with glory. The entire planet shuddered. The world's cameras tried to film, but the images faded away. The sky no longer allowed to be translated into pixels or resolutions. The nations ran, the armies trembled, and the man of deception, the global leader, paralyzed. Her once beautiful appearance vanished like smoke. His eyes became dull. He knew. The throne he had taken by force would now be crushed by justice. Jesus then looked at me for the last time in the vision, and in a voice that seemed to contain all the trumpets combined, he said, "Ethan, write what you saw, for few heard the first call, but many may yet surrender before the end. Tell them I come, with judgment, yes, but with arms still open." And in that instant, I was pulled back. I felt a violent impact, as if my spirit were plunging into a tunnel. I saw flashes of the hospital, distant voices, the noise of machines, and then my eyes opened. I was on a stretcher, with doctors screaming that my heart had stopped for 6 minutes. My wife held my hand, and when she saw me come back to life, she began to cry, saying, "You're back, you're back." But I knew I was no longer the same. I didn't come back to live comfortably. I came back to shout from the rooftops what I saw. September is no longer an ordinary month. The trumpets have already sounded. The time, it's already over. And the next time the heavens open, it won't be a warning. It will be judgment. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.